Okay, welcome to week 7. Last week we learned a little bit about the power of randomness. Now we're going to see it in action this week in two ways. One, and this is mostly what we're going to focus on, random sampling, but also, especially in the readings, there's a bit on random assignment, which is also very important and which we'll get into a little more later. So random sampling. Sampling in general is this powerful concept that we'll explore this week of taking a small section of the population because it's much more efficient time-wise, cost-wise, and then looking at some statistics within that sample and then generalizing to the larger population that we're actually concerned about. The population is what we really want to know information about. The sample is just the way that we get that information. So let's start here with a real quick example. On the screen here you see my section of my Facebook friends page. And I'm just kind of curious sitting here. I wonder what the average number of friends my Facebook friends have is. So I have enough friends that I don't want to go through and count them all one by one. That would be tedious. So I'm going to take a sample here. Now I could take a random sample, or a pseudo-random sample anyway, by using the random. I have 619 friends here, so I could go on my spreadsheet. I could go random or rand between 1 and 619, and then I could copy that down however big I wanted my sample. But instead of that, I'm just going to use, the problem there is Facebook doesn't have it organized in a way that I could easily capture, for example, the 372nd friend. So looking at these friends, I don't see any particular arrangement of them, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, whether this is a fair assumption. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull off the first 30. Why 30? Well, 25 to 30 tends to be a minimum, what we want for a random sample of a mean, and we'll look at that a little bit more when we cover the central limit theorem. So I'm going to just start typing in the friends here and how many friends they have, and let me pause it so you don't have to watch me do all this. Okay, so here I've input the first 30 friends and how many friends each of them has, Facebook friends. And I even created a little handy histogram chart so we can take a look at that. So you can see we have a skewed distribution here. And remember, we say skewed right or skewed positive when the tail is out here to the right, which it is, the longer tail. And then I can easily get an average of these, right? That's just the formula, the average of the first 30 cells. So the average number of friends that my Facebook friends in this sample have is 283. That gives me a ballpark estimate, but I want to be a little more precise. I mean, that really just tells me about these 30 friends, but remember, I'm interested in all my Facebook friends. I want the average number of friends for all my Facebook friends, but I don't want to go through all the work of counting them all one by one and taking the average. So the next thing I'm going to do here is take a standard deviation. Again, this is something that we've done before, so this shouldn't be new. I am using a sample standard deviation, notice, because we looked at this last week a bit. I don't have the entire population here. I just have a sample. And then I'm going to calculate what's called a standard error. And at this point, this is going to be fairly foreign to you until we get into the concept this week. But I do want to show you how to do it. So I'm going to take the standard deviation here and divide it by the square root of my sample size, which in this case is 30. Okay, so I have these numbers here. How do they help me? Well, the standard error tells me, with this standard error, I can build something called a confidence interval. And I'm going to make a 95% confidence interval. And let me talk about that in just a second. So I'm going to do this by starting with my mean and subtracting 2 of these standard errors. And then I'm going to go back to the mean, and I'm going to add on 2 of these standard errors. And this gives me a range, 196 friends to 370 friends. So what does that range mean? It means that if I can be fairly certain that this was a random sample, that there wasn't any pattern that Facebook was using to arrange my friends, and a pattern that would affect the number of friends that might order my friends. If I can be fairly comfortable that it's a random sample that's representing the entire population, then I can be 95% confident that somewhere between 196 and 370 lies the true population mean. In other words, the true average number of friends that my Facebook friends have. If I wanted to be a little bit more confident, so let's say I want to be 99% confident, I could start with that same average, but this time, oops, I would have to go 2.5 standard deviations, standard errors, my bad, in both directions. And let's see, there. So 174 to 391. So in other words, this is a 95% confidence interval, 99% confidence interval. Okay, so I'm 95% sure it's here, but I'm almost certain it's somewhere between 174 and 390. So if someone were to ask me, how sure are you that your average Facebook friend has less than 400 friends, I would be pretty sure about that. In fact, more than 99% sure. However, just to be clear, I would want to make sure that this is some kind of random mechanism that Facebook is using, because part of the key of a random sample is that each collection of individuals inside of the population should have the same chance of being chosen. So if I'm going to take a random sample of size 30, then each set of 30 people in my population should be equally likely to be chosen for my sample. And if Facebook is using some kind of mechanism to order my friends, then that may not be true. Okay, so this is a brief introduction. You're going to get into it. You're going to see some videos, some explanations. You're going to do a little bit of this random sampling, not so random sampling. I expect that you'll have more questions this week. That's natural. That's fine. Please contact me as you do. We can video it. There's a place, notice, in the forum for questions. Use that forum this week to voice the questions you have as you're going through this material. And I will see you next week.